Well, hello and welcome to Barcelona. Formula One's 2020 pre-season is over. I'm Alex Callan-Orcus. With me is Jonathan Noble, Motorsport.com's F1 editor. And here also Stuart Codling, executive editor at GP Racing magazine. Now, the final day in the paddock, 6 days of testing, it's all over. Valtteri Bottas of Mercedes ended with the fastest time of the day, a 1 minute 16.196, which he set on the C5 tyres. Now that's actually half a second slower, roughly half a second slower than what he did in the first test. So not quite as quick from Mercedes. They have been quicker overall, but in the previous test. Second was Max Verstappen from Red Bull. He was a little bit behind Bottas on the C4 tyres, so slightly harder rubber. And then Daniel Ricciardo, who topped the morning running, ended up third on the day. So what do we make of that? Mercedes quick, but not as quick as it went in test one, John.
Well, Mercedes not as quick in test one, and a few more doubts about them actually. No doubts. I think they're the quickest car. It seemed very comfortable. Lewis said today, "I've got a car and I can attack. I feel confident with." So that's good. But the question mark is the power unit. Yes. We found out after the test last week they changed the power unit last week. Lewis Hamilton had a problem yesterday. Some oil warning light flickered on, and the engine shut down. That was flown back to Brixworth. So they refitted an engine today. So there's 3 engine changes this week. And there's some doubts and concerns, especially Williams having problems as well. So while pace-wise they're good, they admit there are some question marks on the reliability front.
It's kind of tricky to actually say anything about pace at all. I've almost not paid much attention to what lap times people are doing because
you were busy in the paddock doing your job as a journalist.
I was busy doing my job as a journalist, but
I'm
also
very glad to hear it.
I feel like the times are a bit phony, really. Like no one's really shown what they can actually do.
I think we're going to get onto that when we talk particularly about Red Bull later on, because they really, I think, haven't shown their hand yet, whereas Ferrari, while also probably keeping something on the table, they did do a race run today which revealed a few things. But John, as you said, we were both at Lewis Hamilton's media session earlier, and he said there's plenty of problems the team have got to solve. It doesn't look like a bad car or anything. It's just the reliability gremlins obviously playing a little trick on his mind there, or got him thinking about things that could go wrong. Yeah,
I think it's fine. I mean, the engine is a big question mark, and it's something they can't answer yet. Brixworth is now working probably through the night, probably through the weekend, to try to get to the bottom of what's gone wrong with these power units. I understand it was 2 separate problems, so it's not one issue that's recurring all the time. But also at this stage, you don't want to come out into the media and say, "Oh, everything's hunky-dory and perfect. We're going to get pole position in Melbourne and win the race," because all that does is you fall over flat on your face come Sunday night in Melbourne.
Lewis also likes to use these press conferences as a means of sending out coded statements to the team and saying, don't let up, don't slack, we've got to keep pushing. So we could also maybe read it as that. He's saying to the factory, just keep it up.
Indeed, and he also spoke about breaking the engineers with all the work they've done on the track over recent years, and that's how they come up with wonderful innovations like the DAS system that we saw last week. But it was interesting to hear Lewis, because I think we're going to come on to a little bit later talking about Red Bull and potentially not seeing everything that team has got. And Ferrari, we know there's been question marks all throughout testing about how high their power unit's been running, how much we've really seen from them. But he was sort of saying a lot of teams are playing themselves down so they can over-deliver later on. So just clear, Valtteri Bottas talked about teams playing games and things going on. So it's been a very cagey pre-season.
I think so. I think what's made it probably more cagey is the fact we've got the same tyres as last year. So we haven't got these massive variables. Everyone knows roughly what the different compounds can do. The programs have been slightly adjusted because there's more understandings. You're not flicking things around so much. Plus, there's not been much evolution of cars. So you're not trying to understand a new aero concept. So the more things are stable from a team's perspective, the more variables they throw into the mix to better understand them.
Now, what do we make of Red Bull? As I said, Max Verstappen, second place on the day, but it didn't really look like they did any particularly conclusive long running, certainly from we could see in the media centre, and that goes for all throughout testing. Again, John, you and I went to see Christian Horner and Max Verstappen, and they said in a press conference at lunchtime, you can't read anything into testing, as they often do, but they seem pretty relaxed. There certainly doesn't seem to be any urgent concerns, judging just from their body language and their statements.
Yeah, it's a team that's doing quite well in testing often says you can't read anything into testing. It's kind of one of those you've got to try and work out what they're trying to deny they're saying. So in the fact they say don't read anything into it means what we can read into it is that they look in quite good shape. I think the only question mark we have about Red Bull is the car seems quite nervous. Is there a balance issue? Is the transition through the corner destabilising the car? Max says that's not the case. He's finding the limits, but I think we'll see in Australia, a different track, a bumpy track where you've got to attack the curbs, if that really is the case or not.
It was interesting that they tried to pour a little bit of cold water on the whole twitchiness thing, didn't they? Max tried to laugh it off by saying, well, I knew I was coming to this press conference and I knew I needed something, I'd have something to talk about, so I just thought I'd just spin it. But that doesn't really strike me as very plausible. The car does look a little bit nervous out on track, but who knows what program they're running? Maybe they're on light tanks when that happened. It's difficult to tell.
Indeed, and there was another spin for Albon this morning. He went off at the turn 12, long right-hander going up the hill there, but he went off into the gravel, was able to drive away, and there were no red flags on this final day, so no unnecessary disruptions. Now, John, you went and spoke to Mattia Binotto at his press conference. How's Ferrari feeling? Still pessimistic about Australia?
Well, there's two fascinating aspects of today. First of all, literally 5 minutes ago, before testing, 5 minutes before the testing ended, FI put a statement out, a very cryptic statement, saying that following analysis of Ferrari's engine last year, they've reached a settlement with Ferrari, the terms of which will remain secret. No mention that they found the engine to be legal. No mention it was illegal, but it seems there is some, grey area. They found something in the rules, especially the fact Ferrari's promised to work with the FIA to find ways to better police and monitor teams in the future. It
was more interesting about what it didn't say than what it did say. And when we tried to find various spokespeople from the FIA for comment, they'd knocked off for the evening. So everyone says that 6 o'clock on a Friday is a great time to bury bad news, and that's pretty much what they did, or bury no news.
Well, I think burying big news, and I think all this is going to do is delay the massive explosion that's likely to come from other teams about what was really going on last season. The next time we see Toto Wolff, Christian Horner, Cyril Abiteboul, this is going to be a hot topic in Australia. What were Ferrari doing last year?
I think it's fair to say that this whole statement's gone around this paddock like vomit in a lifeboat, because the various team principals are furious. The ones we've actually seen, most of them have disappeared. So I think it's going to come back to bite us in the next few days. We'll probably find out a little bit more. Someone's going to dredge up someone to comment.
Indeed, as you can probably tell, the packing up is in full swing. It's been quite an overcast and dark day, so I hope the camera can pick out what's going on out there. But certainly, probably no coincidence at the timing of that statement coming out, given how controversial it is.
No, exactly. So Mattia earlier on, before we were aware of any of this was going on, spoke about the car's performance. Yes, they've made the step forward in corners, but they are suffering on the straights. And Mattia said it's a combination of the engine. They say they're not as strong as last year. Is that related to the having two fuel sensors now, so closer monitoring what they're up to? Only they'll know. But also the car is draggy, and that's something that they're going to have to focus on in the early stage of the season to try and cut down that drag.
How has McLaren's testing been, and how was he on the last day?
163 laps today, which is a pretty impressive amount of running. I suppose what's interesting about this whole midfield is that all of them trying to play down their relative performance. Just a few notes I took during the course of the press conference. He said they've added good downforce. I think good is interesting there, because that's a car that traditionally McLaren have suffered with drag and not necessarily getting much downforce for it. They said they're happier than they were 12 months ago, and they're actually seeing real improvements in sectors 1 and 2, but they're not 100% satisfied with the improvements they've seen in sector 3. So they've obviously been quite ambitious with the targets they've set out for that car, and they're sort of narrowing in on them. And the other thing that was very interesting for me is that he said that McLaren aren't very happy with the way the car works on the C4 tyre, and yet he set his fastest time of the day on that C4 tyre. So that's also something to throw into the mix. Maybe a sign that they're not showing their hand either.
Absolutely, but building on that, what Lando Norris said at his press conference when he finished his running yesterday, he wasn't in the car today on the final day, he said that the new McLaren feels less on the edge, so happy overall with consistency at McLaren.
Yeah, and they're also looking at their opposition, and Carlos was saying that he rates AlphaTauri and Racing Point as maybe the most dangerous people to beat this season, and he pointed at a 17.3 that the Racing Point did on Wednesday straight out of the box, and he said that they haven't really improved much since then, which suggests that maybe they're, if not sandbagging, not been trying particularly hard. Certainly today we saw, I think Perez was driving today, and there were a couple of times he went purple in the first couple of sectors and then shipped half a second in the last one, which doesn't come from having a moment, it comes from lifting off, doesn't it?
Possibly a big lift there indeed. Now, obviously, that Racing Point has been a big topic throughout testing, because lots of comments on whether it's a pink Mercedes, things like that, certainly very, very similar to the W10. Now, John, you were down with technical director Andy Green. What was his response to the whole Farrago?
Well, I mean, first of all, he says that what we've done is totally legal. I think other teams were naive not to exploit these opportunities. So that they're standing by it. But there's a quiet, not even a quiet confidence from him. A lot of confidence from him about what this car is. There were some suggestions last week that Racing Point could be a match for Ferrari in pace terms. Mattia Binotto even went as far yesterday as saying Racing Point could be a threat at the start of the season. So I said to Andy, this Mattia says, is this real? Are you thinking this yourselves? And he smiled and said, let's see. He says, we've got a good package. So they're confident, but let's just see how far up that top they can push.